Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a technology, and marketing entrepreneur from Los Angeles, USA, Mr. Stephen Sakach. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Welcome. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Stephen is the co-founder of aiCMO. He's the founder and chief executive officer of the Zero Company, and he's the host and producer of the Bliss Business Podcast. So, Stephen, my first question to you, can you share a few defining moments from your early career that shaped your path towards empathetic AI and human centered marketing?
Certainly. Yeah, I think I can think of a couple. The first one that comes to mind is sitting there with my grandfather, who was 80 something at the time. And uh, we were just talking about business. And he said, whatever you do, do it with love. And that just kind of stuck with me. And so that one stuck with me. And then I think there was another event where I was at this consciousness event where you've got people talking about oneness and integral theory and things like this, and then we're sitting there at breakfast, and I think John McKay was there with Whole Foods, and you have a bunch of people there talking about consciousness, and they're like, how are you going to apply this to your business? And I'm thinking at the time, I'm in Google search business, and I'm thinking, how am I going to add consciousness to, the one headline and two description lines I've got in there? And so that kind of stuck with me, for the next really probably couple decades, just how can we add consciousness into
Mm,
into what we're doing?
mm,
And really it became kind of this journey and all these other things around the business, that you put together, where you're starting to build love into your business, and then finding your higher purpose and stuff like that, and then ultimately that does come out in the stories you tell about
mm.
your business and your marketing.
Great response. And what inspired the transition from running a traditional digital media agency to pioneering an empathy driven AI with aiCMO?
Yeah, when we talk to chief marketing officers, and we're working with them, in our marketing agency, at any given time, maybe we're affecting 60, 70 different businesses, and we were wondering, how can we do this at scale?
Mm,
Is there any way to bring what we're doing, that sort of empathetic approach to marketing at scale? And then we thought, why don't we just build our own chief marketing officer? Is that possible
mm,
with AI? And so we set out to do that. And really, we wanted to make sure it was this empathetic based chief marketing officer that would really start with your higher purpose and work around telling your story of your business, around building emotional connection and empathizing with your customers. And so that was really kind of the shift from a regular marketing agency to, into the tech side of things, is trying to build our own CMO.
mm. Well said. Thank you. And based on all the work that you've done, what common misconceptions have you seen that businesses have towards human centered marketing?
Maybe that you can't both profit and put good into the world at the same
Mhm,
time. Maybe I think a lot of businesses don't realize that you can have sort of this authentic higher purpose and still do extremely well,
mm,
financially. They aren't mutually exclusive. And in fact, I kind of think that's the future of business, where it's going, is to really find meaning in what you're doing. And it doesn't have to be like charity or anything like that. It can be, your purpose can be, kindness or connecting people or
mm,
something like that. So I think uh, those two, profit and having that human-centered marketing is just not mutually exclusive.
mm, mm. Well said. Could you describe a moment when your commitment to empathy deeply impacted a business decision or an outcome?
Yeah, if you're doing it right, it should impact every little part of your business in some way or another. So for us, we have this kind of mantra that we call BLISS, which stands for build love into scalable systems
Hmm.
for us. So how can we build love into something, and so that it's not just a random kind of act of kindness, by someone who's really caring. You've seen those people that are just have
Hmm.
that charisma to them. Well, if they're not there, where's that love go? Can we systemize it in some way or another? So um, I think when we start out on that kind of journey of trying to ask that question, how can we build love into this part of our business and then
Hmm.
this other part and then this other part? And then little by little, little makes a lot, right? And so I think then after a while, you kind of see that your whole business starts to change a little bit. Um, and for us, that might be resonating with our clients and building our client relationships
Hmm.
even more meaningful. And we've had some, on the marketing side, uh, times when, with the economy where tough decisions had to be made and they trusted us to make it. And they came out, the other side of that, doing much, much better than before. So building those relationships, I think, and it all starts kind of going back to, that empathy and that love in
Right,
what we're doing.
right, right. And how do you practically integrate empathy into a digital marketing strategy? And give me an example if you can.
Yeah, I think so when we talk about empathetic marketing, we want to think about how something makes you feel, right? Not just like this transactional approach to marketing, like 10% off or 20%. No, it's how something makes you feel. So, if you're going to a tailor or something, they make you a really nice suit and you're feeling good about yourself, right? Or maybe you're not just getting your hair cut, but they're making you feel good because you've got a big day coming ahead, right? And so when you start focusing on the feeling side of something, that's where you can really make that connection with people. And I think we can get into probably some of the details there. There's like 31 uh emotional clusters in advertising and
Hmm.
another 17 in the consumption of that product or
Hmm.
service. And so when you really focus on that customer journey, what they're going through, how they're feeling in those different parts of that journey,
Hmm.
that's really that empathetic part of marketing where you can connect beyond just, that first transaction.
Hmm. Very interesting. But the other question that I wanted to ask you, Stephen, connected with empathy, is that uh, what are some of the barriers companies could face when trying to embed empathy into a strategy?
Yeah, I think, if you're going to be empathetic, sometimes that means you're going to have maybe give your people a lot more freedom. You're going to do things that are loving, but you also want accountability.
Right.
So the greater freedom you have, the more accountability you probably need to have.
Correct.
So if you don't have that accountability in what you're doing
Hmm.
and you're just empathetic, then, well, you could probably be taken advantage of, right? Or something in that regard. So I think you really do have to focus on kind of balancing those two elements together in order for it to be truly successful.
Mhm. And what would be the first step, in your view, that a business leader should take if they want to move their organizations towards more empathetic practices?
Well, first you got to start with yourself, I think.
Mhm.
You got to work on yourself. Your people don't need to be dealing with your problems. So, put some time in yourself, work on your EQ, your emotional intelligence, work on how you can be in service to the teams and people around you. Um, and then you'll start kind of thinking about things in a little bit more of an empathetic fashion, right? And maybe you could even take it a step further where, I think a lot of businesses they've got that sort of traditional hierarchy model, right? Where, there's a boss and the boss of the boss and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of these kind of next level businesses are kind of flipping that into sort of this self-managed structure where you're trying to empower people, right, and help them l live and work in a more meaningful fashion. So I think when you start questioning maybe some of the traditional structures, when you start really doing work on yourself to make yourself much more empathetic,
Hmm.
that's the first place I'd start.
Yeah. But in a world, and I've spent all my life in marketing and branding, how can brands build genuine emotional connections through marketing in a world often driven by metrics and efficiency?
Yeah, and That's a very good question. I think that they often go hand in hand, though, for instance. So if you're able to build that emotional connection, it's going to be more profitable. So there's a 306% better lifetime value for a customer who
Mm.
has that emotional connection versus one who's just satisfied.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that almost that holy grail of marketing is if you can build that connection where it almost even builds a community and a
Mm.
following.
Mm.
Um, but the key to that, I think, is really trying to be authentic. I
Mhm.
think that's kind of vital. You know, you want to be genuine. You these younger generations will turn on you in a second if they
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
they see that you aren't.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you really want to be careful there. They can sniff out if you're faking it, and your marketing will reflect it when you're faking it because, if you hop on a trend or something that's really not about kind of your higher purpose, people
Mm.
will sense that. And so with our software, aicmo.io, that's where we start is with that purpose.
Mhm.
And we want you to tell a story about that purpose.
Mm. Amazing. And what role does storytelling play in
Yeah, I
creating an
think
authentic marketing campaign which has empathy?
that's it's just a huge part of it. So, like I said, if you're starting with that purpose, and people can resonate with your higher purpose, they kind of want to see themselves in your story.
Mm.
Right? They, if it's a good story, if it's a bad story, they don't want anything to do with you. But if it's a good, authentic story with a higher purpose,
Mm.
they want to see themselves in that story. And so, we tell people, hey, collect those stories that you have, share those, start internally. Your people want to hear those good stories, and that's what gives them energy, is hearing that, and then take that externally to your marketing.
Mm.
And really, try and be transparent. Like I said, if you've got say like a eco-friendly purpose or something to what you're doing and maybe
Right.
it's not always easy to get there, tell that story of your struggles and tell that story of how you've had success and failures, and bring your audience along with you. They're going to appreciate that and they're going to participate in that. So that storytelling is really one of those big connecting pieces in
Mm.
building that emotional connection.
Well said. And what would you say are some of the ethical considerations businesses should keep in mind when leveraging AI?
Yeah, I think a lot of people now are really, I don't know, what ChatGPT said, what they've doubled in the past few weeks to
Yeah.
1 billion users or something. And I think if I'm play with that, if I'm a business, maybe I'm a window washer in Los Angeles and I say, write me a blog about window washing. And then
Mm.
I'm also a window washer in Florida and I say, write me a blog about window washing. They might be really similar
Mhm.
things. And almost to the point of like similar lines in there and stuff where I think, you want to be careful because you might not look very ethical in your marketing there when it's kind of repeating the same stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the challenges we really worked on with trying to help with our software is help you, what's your higher purpose? How do you differentiate from your competitors? And let's work on your brand voice that's uniquely you so that you're bringing all these different elements in so that when you're trying to build a blog article or social media campaign that it's not feeling like you copied it from from somewhere. So I mean, I'd say that one thing too. And ethically, I feel like AI is going to amplify everything and it will amplify our better angels or our inner demons, I think.
Mhm. Mm.
So if businesses are like they have been for the past 50 years, really defined on, the sole pursuit of profit is our number one thing,
Right.
you're having AI just optimizing toward the sole pursuit of profit. Well, what about the people? What about all the other stakeholders? What about your community? What about your environment? What about all these other considerations in that process? So we need to go beyond just thinking about that profit. We need to have more of a conscious approach to AI.
Mm. Well said. But we've been talking of all the advantages of empathy. My next question is that can empathy ever become a disadvantage in business? And how should leaders manage such a situation?
Yeah, I think, like I'd mentioned, you want to have that accountability to go alongside with your empathy, and you can offer all kinds of things, with flexibility, remote working, all those things to be more empathetic, right, in how you run your business. But if people take advantage of that and you're not getting the output that you're needing, suddenly, maybe there's that one employee that's not doing it. Everyone else is doing it. Now you're going to have resentment built up for that one
Yeah.
employee, and it's going to infect your whole business. So really, I think that accountability aspect to it is going to be key. And I think
Mm.
accountability and transparency, I think those are
Right.
really two huge
Well said.
elements to that.
And with AI increasingly shaping marketing decisions, how can brands maintain genuine human authenticity in their communication?
Yeah, this is a good question, and it's one, the way I like to think of it sometimes is like, can AI help us? Can artificial intelligence help us be more real? You see,
Mm.
right? It's kind of interesting thought. Um, I think like what we're trying to do with our marketing is tie it into your higher purpose, right?
Mm.
Make sure that this is going to be your guide rails for your marketing campaigns, for the
Yeah.
story that you tell about your business. And that's just a big deal because if you want to give people more freedom and empower them more, as long as they've got that purpose
Mm.
behind what they're doing, uh, you can give them a lot of freedom, but they'll still stay genuine to what the organization's purpose is. And now marketing, like if you are not walking the walk,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're just talking a good story,
Mm.
it's going to show and it's going to backfire on you badly. So you have
Right.
to make sure that this is what my organization is about
Mm.
and make sure, everyone's on the same page in that. Then tell your stories,
Yeah.
right, about that because otherwise, like I said before, yeah, younger generations not going to they're going to see right through that. They're the most marketed generation in the world. They're very skeptical to begin with. So
Correct.
you really need to be about it.
Very well said. Great response. I have time for two more questions. If businesses embrace empathetic AI, how do you think this will transform or change customer expectations?
Yeah, I think it's going to help in a lot of ways.
Mm.
AI is actually really getting good at being empathetic. You've got like customer service stuff where the AI is outscoring other people,
Yeah.
like actual
Yeah.
humans
Yeah.
in a way. And so, maybe that's going to set the bar for us a little higher
Mm.
as
Mm.
people to to be a little more kind, to be a little more friendly in
Mm.
how we're interacting. So I think it's who knows where this is ultimately going to go with
Yeah.
AI and stuff,
Yeah.
but I th- I I do think in a way it's going to prompt us to be better people if
Mm.
if we treat it
Correct.
right.
Correct. Correct. And my last question for you, Stephen, can you, for my viewers and listeners, talk about any case study or experience where embedding empathy noticeably shifted business outcomes, either positively or negatively?
Yeah, I can think of both. The first that comes to mind is obviously there's some great brands out there that have really had these very empathetic stories. I think like
Hmm.
Dove Real Beauty
Yeah.
campaigns, for example, that one kind of went viral. It's a perfect example of doing good and also, being able to market.
Mm.
Um, on the other side of that, I feel like there was like a Pepsi commercial like 5 years ago is another example of where they were just sort of pandering to a social movement at the time, and it didn't feel genuine, and everyone would just felt like, oh, you're just being fake about it. So I think yeah, there's a lot of advertising examples out there if you aren't authentic to it where it can hurt you. But if you are, you know, it can really make a huge difference. And I even see this like when I'm talking to a client,
Mm.
um, and they haven't really articulated their higher purpose in their business yet. And I remember talking to this client about he's building these survival cases, right, for like a disaster. And we're talking about all the features and everything like that. And I'm all, okay, wait a minute. Let's just step back for a second. What's
Yeah.
the higher purpose here? It's to protect your family, to care for your loved ones,
Mm.
right? Let's focus on that. And and you can see the light bulb go off in his head and you can see him get energized just thinking about that. Like, yes,
Mm.
exactly. This is what we
Mm.
want to do.
Mm.
And and really, if you can get that throughout your company, right now, there's what, 80% of the world's population is not engaged at work. And that's just an awful tragedy. They're spending 8 hours a day, all these days a week, month after month, doing something that they just don't care about. This is just an awful tragedy. And I think, as a marketing, and business leaders, we can help change some of that if we just sort of focus on some of the things that we're talking about.
Well said. And on that note, Stephen, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. I think we covered some fascinating ground on empathy and AI. You spoke to me about empathy-driven AI. You spoke to me about how to integrate empathy into a digital marketing strategy. We spoke about embedding empathy into a business strategy. We spoke about building emotional connections. We also spoke about creating authenticity, about ethical considerations, and about how AI can actually shape marketing decisions. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.